It always starts the same. You text someone, no reply. You share something close to your heart, and they brush it off. You walk into rooms and feel invisible. People smile, but no one sees you. You scroll through your phone wondering, how do I have 100 contacts and yet feel completely alone? And slowly, a voice creeps in. You don't matter. They forgot you. Even God is silent. But what if I told you that this isolation, this unbearable silence, this season where everyone seems to walk past you like you're not even there, is sacred? What if being ignored by people is the very thing that's positioning you to be noticed by God? Let me tell you about Maya. She was the glue in every group, the encourager, the one people called when they needed prayer, advice, or just someone to listen. But then, everything shifted. Friends stopped calling. Family withdrew. She wasn't invited anymore. No one checked in. And it hurt. Deep. Not because she was craving attention, but because she was craving connection. One night, in tears, she whispered, God, why is everyone ignoring me? And though heaven didn't thunder back with an answer, something in her spirit heard, because I'm trying to get you alone. This is what you're not told. That spiritual isolation isn't punishment, it's preparation. You see, we often ask God for clarity, purpose, anointing, but we want to receive it in a crowd. And God says, no, come away. I want to talk to you in the secret place. But what do? We keep running back to people, to distractions, to affirmation, to applause, to belonging. And so, he lets us be ignored, not because he's cruel, but because he's jealous for your attention. C.S. Lewis once said, God cannot give us peace apart from himself, because it is not there. There is no such thing. So if your peace depended on people, God, in his mercy, began to remove them. Let that sit for a moment. What if God allowed you to be ignored so that your identity wouldn't be built on attention? What if the silence of others is creating the space where God's voice can finally thunder? Let's go deeper. There's a story in 1 Kings 17. The prophet Elijah had just called for a drought, and instead of God placing him before kings and crowds to celebrate his obedience, he sends Elijah to isolation, to a place called Kerith Ravine. No spotlight, no platform, just ravens and a brook. Why? Because public power requires private pruning, and isolation is God's operating table. He removes you from the crowd to do heart surgery without distractions. He quiets the noise, so you'll finally hear what's broken inside you. He hides you to heal you. And yes, it hurts. It's confusing when the people you've poured into suddenly act like you don't exist. When you go from everybody's person to nobody's priority. But maybe they didn't change. Maybe God shifted their hearts just enough to make space for you to come back to his. If that line just hit your soul, write, I'm coming back to his heart in the comments right now. Not for the algorithm, but because every declaration you make breaks something in the spirit realm. Now lean in close. There's something we have to uncover. Have you ever asked God for elevation? Have you ever prayed, use me, Lord, or take me deeper, or show me your purpose for my life? Well, this is the price. Before David was king, he was ignored in a field. Even his own father didn't invite him in when Samuel came to anoint the next ruler. Imagine that. Your family sees every one of your brothers, but they leave you in the dirt with sheep and silence. And yet, it was in that obscurity that God saw him, not in the palace, in the pasture. The throne comes after the field, the oil flows after the overlooking, and the same is true for you. So when you're being ignored, overlooked, unfollowed, ghosted, left unread. Don't panic, don't chase, don't beg. Just be still, because the one who sees all is watching what you'll do when no one else is. Will you collapse without their attention? Or will you rise because of his? Your reaction in isolation determines your readiness for revelation. And maybe, just maybe, your silence is about to turn into strategy. Your rejection is about to birth repositioning. But that only happens if you stop trying to fill the void and start asking, God, what are you doing in this silence? Because he is doing something. If you've ever felt hidden, type hidden but not forgotten in the comments right now. Let it be your holy reminder that God never loses track of his chosen. But now that you're hidden, the next question is even more important. What is God trying to reveal to you in the hiding? And why is your isolation the exact environment needed for what's coming next? In the middle of her isolation, Maya stopped asking, why are they ignoring me? And started asking, God, what are you showing me? That's when everything began to shift. Because here's what most people miss. The silence around you often reveals the storm inside you. And God will quiet the world around you just long enough to deal with what's been buried beneath your surface. So many of us live loud, busy, distracted, connected to everything and everyone, but broken, and we don't even realize we're bleeding until we're alone. Spiritual isolation is heaven's way of turning off the world's volume so you can finally hear your soul, that thing you've been pushing down, the anxiety, the fear, the identity crisis, the shame. God brings it to the surface in isolation, not to shame you, but to free you. Let's go deeper. Jesus, yes, even Jesus experienced this. Before his ministry began, the Holy Spirit led him into the wilderness. 40 days, no followers, no applause, no miracles, just temptation, hunger, silence, and God. Why? Because public calling demands private consecration, and isolation is the furnace where intimacy with God is forged. And don't miss this. Even in that wilderness, the enemy came. If you're really the Son of God, you've heard that voice too, haven't you? If you're really called, if you were valuable, they wouldn't ignore you. If God was with you, you wouldn't be so alone. But remember what Jesus did? He didn't fight with feelings. He fought with the word. He said, "It is written." And that's your blueprint. Because isolation isn't just a season of silence. It's a battlefield of identity. This is where the enemy tries to redefine who you are. Not with chains, but with lies. That you're forgotten, that you're replaceable, that you're unworthy. But it's also where God reaffirms the truth, that you're set apart, that you're chosen, that you are his. If this part is breaking something open in you, type, "I will not believe the lie," in the comments right now. Let that be a shield over your identity. Now, I want to show you something powerful. Let's talk about Joseph, the boy with big dreams, and a family who couldn't stand him for it. They didn't just ignore him, they sold him. Talk about betrayal, from favored son to forgotten slave to falsely accused prisoner, alone, isolated, misunderstood. But what felt like rejection was really redirection. Because while his brothers celebrated getting rid of him, God was secretly positioning him for the palace. Here's the key. God didn't just put Joseph in a pit. He placed him on a path, a lonely path, a painful one, but a path nonetheless. And every delay, every betrayal, every silence from the people Joseph once trusted was part of divine orchestration. You feel abandoned, but maybe you're being rearranged. God is not punishing you. He is preserving you. The places you once felt needed were too small for what's coming. So God removed you, even if it broke your heart. Because here's the twist. Sometimes rejection is the only way to make room for resurrection. You don't rise until something dies. Your need for approval, your obsession with being liked, your addiction to validation. And it's in the silence of being ignored that those false dependencies begin to crumble. That's when the real you is formed. The praying you, the warrior you, the can hear God without a mic you, the I don't need the crowd, I've got the cloud kind of you. That version of you doesn't come in a crowd. It's born in caves, in pits, in prison cells of misunderstanding. And maybe that's where you are right now, alone, hidden, misread, unseen. But make no mistake, you are in God's hands, the same hands that molded Moses in the wilderness, that restored Peter after betrayal, that held Jesus in the grave. Those hands are on your life. If you believe God is still holding your purpose, even in the silence, type, "I trust the potter," in the comments. Speak it into your storm, because even when everyone else has left, He stays. And right now, even through this screen, He's whispering, "They may have ignored you, but I never took my eyes off you. You are not forgotten. You are being forged." But here's where it gets even more intense. What if your isolation isn't just about survival, but about the birth of something generational? Something that won't just change your life, but ripple through your family, your future, your faith legacy. What if being ignored by everyone is the very thing God is using to make sure you finally hear Him clearly? When Joseph stood before Pharaoh, interpreting dreams and shifting a nation's future, no one saw the prison cell behind his wisdom. No one remembered the silent years, the abandonment, the betrayal, the painful invisibility. But heaven remembered. Because God never forgets the ones He isolates. He hides them for a reason and reveals them in due season. And maybe that's what's happening to you right now. You're not being dismissed. You're being developed. Isolation is not rejection. It's incubation. But it doesn't feel like that, does it? It feels like abandonment. It feels like loss, like heartbreak that no one even sees. But let me ask you this. What if being overlooked by everyone else is God's way of keeping you reserved for something holy? You see, people will always mislabel what they don't understand. They'll say you're too much, too quiet, too intense, too deep. But that's because you weren't built for crowds. You were built for calling. And sometimes God has to isolate His prophets before He releases their voice. Look at John the Baptist, a voice crying in the wilderness, not in a temple, not at a conference, not in front of thousands, in the wilderness, alone. Why? Because God didn't want His message tainted by culture. He didn't want John's calling contaminated by applause. He needed someone who heard only Him. And maybe, just maybe, He needs the same from you. If that line hit you hard, write this in the comments right now. I'll be the voice in the wilderness. Let the algorithm echo your obedience. Because in a generation chasing attention, being hidden by God is one of the most powerful anointings you can carry. But here's the final twist, and it's the one the enemy hoped you'd never realize. Spiritual isolation doesn't just protect your calling, it prepares you for revival. Because you're not just being isolated, you're being consecrated, set apart, refined, anointed. And when the moment comes and the world finally sees you again, they won't see the same version of you that once begged for attention. They'll see someone who's been with God, someone who glows from private fires, someone who carries a weight that can't be explained, only felt. That kind of person doesn't walk back into the room hoping to be liked. They walk in knowing they're sent. And if you're still breathing, still waiting, still standing in the shadows. You're not disqualified. You're not forgotten. You're not too late. You are right on schedule. Because when God reveals you, He does it right on time. So let your silence strengthen you. Let their distance detox you. Let heaven's hush refine you. Because when this season ends, and yes, it will end, you won't just return stronger. You'll return reborn, like Jesus coming out of the tomb, not just awake, but resurrected. That's what spiritual isolation births. Not bitterness, but power. Not weakness, but revelation. Not emptiness, but divine fullness. So if you've been feeling alone, ignored, passed by, drop this in the comments as your personal prophecy. He's hiding me for something holy. Say it, believe it, live it. Because God is not done with you. He's just preparing the room you're about to walk into. And when you finally enter, they'll wonder where you've been. But you'll know you were with God, in the silence, in the shadows, in the secret place, being rebuilt for glory. So hold on, you're not breaking, you're becoming. And that is why God allowed you to be ignored, so He could make you undeniable.